Hello again, everyone. This is Gavin, and this video is going to be part 2 of our getting started with C++ in Visual Studio Code. So, what I want to talk about in this video is compiling and running your programs. So, you all should have already installed a C++ compiler alongside this, and that can be done by following the instructions on the Visual Studio Code website, right? So where we left off last time was we created a new folder for this simple project that we're starting, and we made our simple program. We clicked the code running button, which is from this extension over here, right? And it ran our code. You can see it printed hello world. Now, an important thing to understand whenever we're running our programs like this is how are they running? Because our source code files themselves are just plain text that we are writing on the screen, right? Saving in this file. So the question is, how does this get translated to a language that our computer can understand as instructions to execute? And that's done through using a tool called a compiler, right? A compiler. So the compiler that we have installed is for C++. The compiler we have installed is G++, right? So the way that works for us is it calls that G++ program, which is a binary executable file that's stored on our computer somewhere. It'll call that, and then that program understands that given certain input source code files, what it has to do to connect those files together, to connect those files to our libraries, right? Cout's part of this IOStream library. Well, what's a library? A library is a chunk of code that's already compiled that has to get linked to our program whenever we compile our program together. So the compiler handles a lot of this stuff for us. And we can try to compile with this button up here, which does a bunch of nonsense that's hard to read. Or what I prefer to do is to compile my programs manually by invoking the compiler executable directly. So what I'm going to do is close out of these terminals here, right? I'm going to delete this main.exe file that was generated earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Terminal, New Terminal, right? And when you do that, it should open a new terminal, which is either going to be in PowerShell or some other thing like command prompt, right? For the sake of this video, I'm going to be using PowerShell. So if you click the little drop down next to the plus here and select PowerShell, that'll open a new PowerShell terminal, and you can close the other one by clicking the trash can. Okay, so now I've got a new project tutorial set up, and I've got a new PowerShell terminal open, and you can see here that it's printing the current directory where I'm at on my PC, right? So C drive /users/yellow submarine/desktop/project setup tutorial, right? And if you remember from the last video, that's this folder I had open that I created in my desktop. So here's the file path to this folder that I have open. So any commands or anything that I run on here is going to be within the context of the folder or directory that I am in. So, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that any relative path we give, right? If I want to use main.cpp, I can type main.cpp, and if it's interpreted as a local path, then it will do that. Then it will understand that this is a local path. So you'll notice there's a suggestion here. The command main.cpp was not found, but it exists in the current location. PowerShell does not load commands from the current location by default. So what we want to do is we can try /main.cpp. But that doesn't actually do anything. And remember, the reason for that, if you recall, is that, again, this is just a plain text file that we've created and written some stuff in, but it's not in a language our computer understands to be able to run. So I'm going to type clear here, and that'll just clear out my terminal window. And instead what we need to do is compile this source code. So the compiler we use is G++, right? So we'll type G++, and to check if this exists, if our computer can find it, you could do G++ space -v, and that'll give you some details about it, right? If it doesn't give you some details, that means it can't be found in your computer path, and that's some more troubleshooting that needs to be done. But we're going to assume for this tutorial that you've already got this part set up. So we will do G++, and then I'm going to do -h. That doesn't do anything. What if I do -help? That doesn't do anything for me. So when we're using G++, what we want to do is we need to list the path to each of our source code files that we're going to use to generate our output. So here that'll be main.cpp, right? And even just that, if I hit enter now, it's going to do that, and it'll create an executable file called A, right? It'll be a.exe, or if you're not on Windows, it'll most likely be called a.out. And what we can do is we can run that executable file that was generated by our compiler, right? Again, it's not going to work if you just type the name of it, but you need to type ./a.exe, right? So ./a, and if you hit tab, it will autocomplete the paths of files that are in the current directory, right? We'll hit enter, and notice it ran this program. It ran this executable file, which is awesome, right? That's exactly what we want. So pretty simply, that's how you compile and run executable files that exist in the current directory. Now, another thing I like to do is actually name the output file, what I want it to be called. So I'm going to do -o, and I'm going to say I want this output file to be called main. Right? And that created a new executable file called main.exe. Right? If I want, I can put main2, right? And it'll make another one. All of these files, however, are the same because the compiler is just compiling the same source code file, right? So I can do ./main, I can do ./main2, I could do main.exe, right? All of that works. So that's it for this tutorial. In the next one, we're going to talk about what do you do when you have multiple CPP files in a project, because when that happens, using your magic button up here to compile suddenly becomes a lot more confusing. So I will see you all in the next video.